Imagine this. You wake up one day, and your life is no longer your own. The man you married, the one who promised to love and cherish you, has turned into someone you barely recognize. He's powerful, controlling, and utterly ruthless. You thought you knew him, but now you're trapped in a gilded cage, where every move you make is watched, every word you speak is measured, and every attempt to escape is met with consequences you can't bear to face. This is the story of she married a ruthless CEO. Now he'll do anything to never let her go. A tale of love, power, and obsession that will leave you questioning how far someone would go to keep what they believe is theirs. If you've ever wondered what it's like to be caught in the web of a man who refuses to let go, then this story is for you. But be warned, once you step into this world, you won't want to leave just like her. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a relationship where you felt like you were losing yourself? Where the person you loved started to change and suddenly, you were no longer an equal but a possession? If so, you're not alone. This story taps into that universal fear of losing control, of being trapped in a love that feels more like a prison than a partnership. And that's why you're here, isn't it? You want to know how this story unfolds? You want to know if she escapes? If she finds herself again? Or if she's doomed to live in the shadow of a man who will stop at nothing to keep her by his side? Well, you're in the right place. By the end of this video, you'll have the answers you're searching for, but only if you stay with me until the very end. Let's set the stage. Meet Elena, a bright, ambitious woman who thought she had it all figured out. She was a rising star in her career, independent and fiercely determined to carve out her own path in life. But then she met Lucas Blackwood, the enigmatic CEO of Blackwood Enterprises. He was everything she never knew she wanted: charismatic, commanding, and utterly magnetic. Their whirlwind romance was the stuff of dreams, and before she knew it, Elena found herself walking down the aisle, ready to start a new chapter with the man she loved. But here's the thing about fairy tales. They rarely tell the whole story, because behind Lucas's charming smile and lavish gifts was a darkness Elena couldn't have imagined, a darkness that would soon consume her entire world. From the outside, Lucas Blackwood was the epitome of success. He was a self-made billionaire, a man who had built an empire from the ground up. But success like that doesn't come without a cost. Lucas was ruthless in business, and that ruthlessness soon spilled over into his personal life. What started as small signs of control, questioning her choices, isolating her from friends, escalated into something far more sinister. Elena soon realized that she wasn't just married to a powerful man. She was married to a man who would do anything to keep her under his thumb. And when I say anything, I mean anything. But here's the twist. Lucas isn't just a villain. He's a man with a past, a man with scars that run deeper than anyone knows. And as much as Elena wants to escape, there's a part of her that can't help but wonder if there's still a glimmer of the man she fell in love with buried beneath the cold, calculating exterior. Now I know what you're thinking. Why doesn't she just leave? It's a fair question, and one that Elena asks herself every single day. But leaving isn't as simple as walking out the door. Lucas has made sure of that. He's woven himself into every aspect of her life, from her career to her friendships, making it nearly impossible for her to break free. And then there's the emotional manipulation, the way he can make her feel like she's the one in the wrong, like she's overreacting or being ungrateful. It's a psychological game, one that keeps her second-guessing herself at every turn. But here's the thing, Elena is stronger than she realizes. And as the story unfolds, you'll see just how far she's willing to go to reclaim her life. But this isn't just Elena's story. It's also Lucas's. Because behind every controlling man is a reason, a trauma, a fear, a vulnerability that drives his actions. And as much as we want to hate him, there are moments when we see the cracks in his armor. Moments when we catch a glimpse of the man he could have been. It's this complexity that makes their relationship so compelling, so heartbreaking, and so impossible to look away from. You'll find yourself torn between wanting Elena to escape and wondering if there's a chance for redemption for both of them. As we dive deeper into this story, you'll encounter themes of power, control, and the lengths people will go to for love or what they think is love. You'll see how easily boundaries can be crossed, how quickly a relationship can turn toxic, and how hard it is to break free once you're in too deep. But you'll also see resilience, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of a woman who refuses to be defined by the man who wants to own her. This is a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, one that will make you question what you would do in Elena's shoes. So, here's my promise to you. If you stick with me until the end of this video, you'll get the answers you're looking for. You'll find out if Elena escapes, if Lucas changes, and if real love can ever survive in the shadow of obsession. But I'll warn you now, the road to those answers is anything but easy. Elena's life before Lucas was a tapestry of dreams and determination. She had grown up in a small town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and opportunities felt like they were reserved for people in bigger cities. But Elena wasn't the type to wait for opportunities to come to her. She chased them. After graduating at the top of her class, she moved to the city, determined to make a name for herself in the competitive world of marketing. Her rise was meteoric, fueled by late nights, endless cups of coffee, and a relentless drive to prove herself. She was the kind of woman who turned heads not just because of her beauty, but because of the fire in her eyes. And then, at a charity gala one fateful evening, she met Lucas Blackwood. He was the kind of man who commanded attention without even trying. Tall, with piercing blue eyes and a voice that could melt ice, Lucas was the embodiment of power and success. When he approached her that night, it felt like the universe had aligned just for them. Their connection was instant, electric, and for the first time in her life, Elena let herself believe in the possibility of a fairy tale. But fairy tales, as Elena would soon learn, often come with a price. In the beginning, Lucas was everything she could have hoped for. He was attentive, generous, and utterly devoted. He showered her with gifts, designer dresses, exotic vacations, even a penthouse overlooking the city. But it wasn't the material things that drew Elena in. It was the way he made her feel. Lucas had a way of looking at her that made her feel like she was the only person in the room, like she was the center of his universe. And for a while, she was. But as the months passed, subtle changes began to creep into their relationship. It started with small things, a comment about how she dressed, a suggestion that she quit her job and let him take care of her. At first, Elena brushed it off as Lucas being protective, but soon, his protectiveness began to feel more like control. He didn't like her going out with friends, especially male colleagues. He questioned her decisions, often dismissing her opinions with a condescending smile. And then there were the phone calls late at night, in hushed tones, that he would end abruptly whenever she walked into the room. Elena tried to convince herself that it was just the stress of running a billion-dollar company. But deep down, she knew something was off. The turning point came one evening when Lucas didn't come home. Elena had prepared a special dinner to celebrate their 6-month anniversary, but as the hours ticked by, her excitement turned to worry. She called his phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that Lucas finally walked through the door, his suit disheveled and his eyes cold. When Elena asked where he had been, he snapped at her, accusing her of being paranoid and controlling. It was the first time he had ever raised his voice at her, and it shook her to her core. That night, as she lay in bed beside him, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that the man she had married was a stranger. But what she didn't know was that this was just the beginning. Lucas's behavior became increasingly erratic. He would disappear for days at a time, offering no explanation, and when he returned, he would be distant, almost cruel. And then, just as suddenly, he would revert to the charming, loving man she had fallen for, leaving Elena confused and emotionally exhausted. As the cracks in their marriage began to widen, Elena found herself drawn into a web of secrets and lies. One evening, while Lucas was away on a business trip, she decided to do something she had never done before. She went through his office. What she found there would change everything. Hidden in the back of a drawer was a file filled with documents, legal papers, financial records, and photographs of people she didn't recognize. Among them was a picture of a woman who looked strikingly similar to Elena, with the same dark hair and green eyes. The woman's name was written on the back of the photo, Isabella. Elena's heart raced as she flipped through the documents, her mind struggling to make sense of what she was seeing. There were bank statements showing large sums of money being transferred to offshore accounts, contracts with names she didn't recognize, and a series of emails that hinted at something far darker than she could have imagined. But before she could piece it all together, she heard the sound of a key turning in the front door. Panicked, she shoved the file back into the drawer and hurried out of the office, her heart pounding in her chest. That night, as she lay in bed pretending to sleep, Elena's mind raced with questions. Who was Isabella? What was Lucas hiding? And why did he have a file filled with documents that looked like they belonged in a crime thriller? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that she didn't really know the man she had married. Lucas had always been secretive about his past, deflecting her questions with vague answers or charming distractions. But now, those secrets were starting to surface, and Elena couldn't ignore them. She knew she had to find out the truth, but she also knew that digging too deep could be dangerous. Lucas wasn't just a powerful man, he was a man who would do anything to protect his secrets. And if he found out that she was snooping, there was no telling what he might do. As the days turned into weeks, Elena began to notice subtle changes in her own behavior. She found herself second-guessing everything she did, afraid of setting off Lucas's temper. She stopped going out with friends, stopped answering calls from her family, and even started dressing the way he wanted her to. It was as if she was slowly disappearing, becoming a shadow of the woman she once was. But deep down, a spark of defiance still burned. She couldn't let Lucas take everything from her, not her independence, not her identity, and certainly not her freedom. And so, she began to plot her escape. It started with small things: stashing away cash, memorizing Lucas's schedule, and reaching out to an old friend who worked in law enforcement. But as she took those first tentative steps toward freedom, she couldn't shake the feeling that Lucas was always one step ahead of her. Meanwhile, Lucas's behavior became increasingly unpredictable. There were moments when he seemed almost paranoid, constantly checking his phone and looking over his shoulder as if he was being watched. Other times, he would be eerily calm, his cold, calculating demeanor sending chills down Elena's spine. She began to suspect that he was involved in something far bigger than she had initially thought, something that went beyond their marriage. And then there were the nightmares. Night after night, Elena would wake up in a cold sweat, her dreams filled with shadowy figures and whispered warnings. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike. But was it just her imagination, or was there something more sinister at play? As the tension between Elena and Lucas reached a boiling point, a new player entered the scene, a mysterious woman named Claire. Claire was everything Elena wasn't: confident, fearless, and unapologetically bold. She claimed to be an old friend of Lucas's, but there was something about her that didn't add up. She seemed to know things about Lucas that even Elena didn't, and her presence only added to the growing sense of unease in the Blackwood household. Claire's arrival marked the beginning of a dangerous game, one that would force Elena to confront the truth about her husband and the life she had been living. But as the stakes grew higher, Elena realized that escaping Lucas's grip would be harder than she ever imagined. Because Lucas wasn't just a ruthless CEO, he was a man who would stop at nothing to keep what he believed was his. And Elena was his most prized possession. As the story unfolds, you'll see Elena's transformation from a woman trapped in a gilded cage to a fighter determined to reclaim her life. You'll witness the lengths Lucas will go to maintain control, and the shocking secrets that lie at the heart of their marriage. But most importantly, you'll be left wondering, can love ever survive in the shadow of obsession? And if it can't, what happens when the line between love and possession becomes blurred? The answers are coming, but they won't be easy to find. So stay with me, because this is just the beginning. The real story is about to unfold, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment. Elena's world was unraveling faster than she could piece it back together. The arrival of Claire had thrown everything into chaos, and the tension in the Blackwood mansion was palpable. Claire's presence was like a storm cloud hovering over Elena's already fragile reality. She was always there, lurking in the background, her sharp eyes watching Elena with a mix of curiosity and something darker, something Elena couldn't quite place. Claire's stories about Lucas's past were vague and cryptic, filled with half-truths and veiled warnings. She spoke of a time before Elena, a time when Lucas was a different man, or perhaps the same man, just without the mask. But every time Elena tried to press for details, Claire would deflect, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. It was as if she was playing a game, one where Elena didn't know the rules but was already losing. Then came the night that changed everything. Lucas had been away on one of his frequent business trips, and Elena had finally mustered the courage to confront Claire. She found her in the study, flipping through one of Lucas's old photo albums with a smirk on her face. The tension between them was thick, and Elena could feel the weight of unspoken truths hanging in the air. "Who are you, really?" Elena demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and frustration. Claire looked up, her expression unreadable. "I'm someone who knows Lucas better than you ever will," she said coolly. "And if you're smart, you'll start asking the right questions." Before Elena could respond, Claire dropped a bombshell. "Did you know Lucas was married before you?" The words hit Elena like a punch to the gut. Married? Lucas had never mentioned a previous marriage. Claire's smirk widened as she handed Elena a photograph, a wedding photo of Lucas and a woman who looked eerily similar to Elena. The woman's name was Isabella, the same name Elena had seen on the back of the photo in Lucas's office. "She disappeared," Claire said, her voice dripping with folk sympathy. "Just like you will if you're not careful." Elena's mind raced as she tried to process what she had just learned. Lucas had been married before? To a woman who looked like her? And what did Claire mean by disappeared? The questions swirled in her head, each one more terrifying than the last. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath her feet. But before she could demand answers, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway sent Claire scurrying out of the room, leaving Elena alone with the photograph and a growing sense of dread. When Lucas walked in moments later, his usual charming self, Elena felt a chill run down her spine. How could she have been so blind? The man standing in front of her was a stranger, and the life they had built together was a house of cards, ready to collapse at any moment. The days that followed were a blur of suspicion and fear. Elena began to notice things she had previously overlooked: the way Lucas's phone always seemed to be on silent, the way he would disappear into his study for hours at a time, the way his eyes would darken whenever she asked too many questions. She started to piece together fragments of information, each one more disturbing than the last. There were the late-night phone calls, the encrypted emails, the sudden influx of cash into their joint account. And then there were the rumors of Lucas's involvement in shady business deals, of people who had crossed him and paid the price. Elena's mind kept circling back to Isabella. What had happened to her? Was she still alive, or had Lucas done something unthinkable? The more Elena thought about it, the more she realized that she might be in over her head. But it was too late to turn back now. She had to know the truth, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Claire's presence continued to loom over the household like a dark cloud. She seemed to take pleasure in Elena's growing unease, dropping cryptic hints and veiled threats whenever Lucas wasn't around. "You think you're special," Claire said one evening, her voice dripping with malice. "But you're just the latest in a long line of women who thought they could change him." Spoiler alert, you can't. Elena wanted to scream, to demand answers, but she knew better. Claire was dangerous, and provoking her could have dire consequences. Instead, Elena focused on her plan to escape. She had been quietly gathering evidence, photos, documents, anything that could expose Lucas's secrets. She had even reached out to a private investigator, a man named Marcus, who had a reputation for handling cases involving powerful people. But as the pieces of the puzzle began to come together, Elena realized that the truth was far more twisted than she had ever imagined. The turning point came one stormy night when Lucas announced they were leaving the country. "It's just for a few weeks," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I have business to attend to, and I want you with me. Elena's heart sank. If she left the country with Lucas, she might never come back. She knew she had to act fast. That night, while Lucas slept, Elena crept into his study and began searching for anything that could help her. She found a hidden compartment in his desk, filled with passports, cash, and a gun. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the passports, each one with Lucas's photo but a different name. Who was this man she had married? And what had she gotten herself into? Just as she was about to take one of the passports, she heard a noise behind her. She turned to see Claire standing in the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. "Looking for something?" Claire asked, her voice dripping with mock innocence. Before Elena could respond, Claire stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with malice. "You should have listened to me," she said. "Now it's too late." The next morning, Elena woke up to find Claire gone and Lucas acting stranger than ever. He was unusually quiet, his eyes distant, as if he were plotting something. Elena's instincts screamed at her to run, but she knew she had to play it smart. She couldn't let Lucas suspect that she was onto him. As the hours ticked by, the tension in the house became unbearable. Elena felt like she was living in a nightmare, one where every move she made could be her last. And then, just when she thought things couldn't get any worse, she received a message from Marcus, the private investigator. "Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street, it read. "I have something you need to see." Elena knew it was a risk, but she had no choice. She had to know the truth. As she made her way to the warehouse, Elena's mind raced with possibilities. What had Marcus found? And would it be enough to bring Lucas down? But when she arrived, the warehouse was empty except for one thing. On the floor, in the center of the room, was a single photograph. It was a picture of Isabella, but this time, she wasn't alone. Standing next to her was Claire, their arms linked like old friends. Elena's blood ran cold as the pieces began to fall into place. Claire wasn't just a random acquaintance, she was connected to Isabella. But how? And what did it mean for Elena? As she stood there, clutching the photograph, she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned, her heart pounding in her chest, and came face to face with Lucas. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were filled with a cold, calculating fury. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low and dangerous. And in that moment, Elena realized that she was no longer the hunter, she was the prey. The stakes had never been higher, and the game had just taken a deadly turn. As Lucas stepped closer, Elena's mind raced with a single terrifying thought. Would she make it out of this alive? Or was she destined to become another one of Lucas's secrets, buried and forgotten like Isabella? The answers were coming, but they would come at a price. And as the storm raged outside, Elena knew that her fight for freedom was far from over. The question was, how far was she willing to go to survive? And what would she have to sacrifice to escape the man who would do anything to never let her go? Elena's heart pounded as Lucas stepped closer, his presence filling the room like a storm about to break. The photograph of Isabella and Claire trembled in her hand, the weight of its implications crushing her. She had come here seeking answers, but now she was trapped in a nightmare of her own making. Lucas's voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried a menace that made her blood run cold. "You've been digging where you shouldn't," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "I warned you, Elena. I told you to let the past stay buried." She backed away, her mind racing for a way out, but the warehouse was empty, the exits too far. She was alone with the man she had once loved, the man who had become her greatest enemy. But Elena wasn't the same woman who had walked into this marriage blindly. The months of fear, manipulation, and secrets had hardened her, sharpened her instincts. She knew she couldn't outrun Lucas physically, but maybe she could outsmart him. "Who is Isabella?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. Lucas's expression flickered, a crack in his icy facade. For a moment, he looked almost human, almost vulnerable. But then the mask slipped back into place, and he smiled, a cold, calculating smile that sent shivers down her spine. "Isabella was my wife, he said, his tone chillingly matter-of-fact. She thought she could leave me just like you. But no one leaves me, Elena. No one. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. Elena's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of the story. Isabella had tried to escape, and she had disappeared. Was that what Lucas had planned for her? Before she could respond, the sound of sirens cut through the silence. Lucas's head snapped toward the door, his expression shifting from anger to panic. Elena seized the moment, darting past him toward the exit. But Lucas was faster. He grabbed her arm, his grip like iron, and pulled her back. You think you can win? He snarled, his face inches from hers. You think you can destroy me? I built an empire, Elena. I don't lose. But as the sirens grew louder, something unexpected happened. Claire appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. In her hand was a phone, the screen glowing with the words "call" connected. It's over, Lucas, Claire said, her voice trembling but firm. The police are on their way. You're done. Lucas's grip on Elena loosened as he turned to face Claire, his expression a mix of shock and fury. You? He spat. After everything I did for you? Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she stood her ground. You didn't do it for me, she said. You did it for yourself. And I won't let you hurt anyone else. The next few minutes were a blur. The police stormed the warehouse, their voices loud and commanding. Lucas was arrested, his hands cuffed behind his back as he shouted threats and curses. Elena stood frozen, watching as the man who had controlled her life for so long was finally brought to his knees. But as the adrenaline faded, she felt a wave of exhaustion crash over her. It was over. Lucas was gone. But at what cost? She turned to Claire, who was now sitting on the floor, her face buried in her hands. Why? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Claire looked up, her eyes filled with guilt and sorrow. Isabella was my sister, she said. I tried to warn her, but she didn't listen. And when she disappeared, I swore I'd make him pay. I just didn't know it would take this long. The revelation hit Elena like a punch to the gut. Claire had been playing a dangerous game, using Elena as bait to bring Lucas down. But in the end, they had both been pawns in Lucas's twisted game of control and power. As the days turned into weeks, Elena began to rebuild her life. Lucas's empire crumbled under the weight of the evidence Claire and Elena had gathered: illegal business deals, offshore accounts, and the truth about Isabella's disappearance. The media dubbed it the scandal of the century, but for Elena, it was a chance to start over. She moved to a small town, far away from the city and the memories that haunted her. She reconnected with her family, found a job she loved, and slowly began to heal. But the scars remained, a constant reminder of what she had survived. And then, one day, she received a letter. It was from Claire, who had disappeared after the trial. The letter was short, but the words stayed with Elena long after she read them. I'm sorry for what I put you through, Claire wrote. But you were stronger than I ever could have been. You gave me the courage to face him, and for that, I'll always be grateful. Be happy, Elena. You deserve it. The story of Elena and Lucas Blackwood became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how easily love can turn into obsession, and how quickly power can corrupt. But for Elena, it was also a story of survival, of finding the strength to fight back and reclaim her life. She had faced the darkest parts of humanity and emerged stronger, wiser, and unbroken. And as she stood on the porch of her new home, watching the sun set over the horizon, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The past would always be a part of her, but it didn't define her. She was free, and for the first time in years, she could breathe. But just when she thought the story was over, a final twist emerged. One evening, as she sorted through the mail, she found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, a picture of Lucas, taken recently, standing in front of a nondescript building. On the back was a message, written in a familiar hand: You thought you were safe. You were wrong. Elena's heart stopped as she realized the truth. Lucas had escaped. He was out there somewhere, and he wasn't done with her. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. And so, the story of Elena and Lucas Blackwood ended as it began with a mystery, a threat, and the promise of more to come. But this time, Elena was ready. She had faced the darkness once, and she could face it again. Because she wasn't the same woman who had walked into that gilded cage. She was stronger, braver, and unafraid. And no matter what Lucas threw at her, she would never let him take her freedom again. The end, or was it just the beginning?